Donna from Tall Poppy Real Estate, and today talking to Stuart Mitchel from Loan Market here at the Ramada Hotel. We're just here today to give you a bit of information on the Queenstown market, talk a little bit about the changes in government legislation, changes in lending criteria. The Queenstown market has been under a lot of press lately with all the new changes coming in, so we're here today to give you a bit of a market wrap. So Stuart Mitchel from Loan Market, tell us a little bit about your services that you offer, if people already don't know. I'm sure many of people, the watchers, do.
Yeah, sure. So as a finance advisor, we're here to guide you through this journey from the start to the end being the settlement, but also beyond settlement. Once you've settled, looking to manage those finances moving forward, make sure you're still with the right bank, the right deals are still on the table. So I think that traditionally, as a finance advisor, only 25% of the marketers tend to come to us, but since the Reserve Bank have got involved with lots of legislation changes, now over 40% of the market comes to somebody like myself.
Yeah.
You know, it's getting trickier and trickier out there, more complicated, more changes. The bank's policies have never been so different as they are today. So whilst it's tough times, it's certainly people like myself as finance advisor were enabled to add much more value now.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think most people might have already been in contact with you. A lot of lending been going on over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
So first, I guess we might touch on those government changes in legislation
Yes.
coming.
Yeah, so there was obviously there's been a change of government, so there's been a few announcements recently, and we'll touch on the important ones from a lending perspective shortly, but the first and foremost is the LVR changes. So as of the 1st of January, currently what we've got today is each bank, only 10% of their lending can go to people with less than 20% deposit.
Yeah.
Now that cap is going to increase to 15% as of the 1st of January. So that's a positive step, you know, for the first home buyers. It's been very difficult to get onto the market to buy existing property because there's been very limited funding available.
Yeah.
So that's great. So that is as of the 1st of January. If you do have less than 20% deposit, now would be the time to try and contact us so we can do a bit of mortgage conditioning and fully understand what your ability is so you're ready when the funding becomes available.
Now that's good. I think it's really important to be prepared. I think many buyers come to us real estate agents looking to buy through open homes but haven't really had that initial conversation with someone like you or the bank. So my first point of call really is to go and see Stuart to really sort of suss out your situation before you move forward.
Yeah.
The market, I think a lot of properties are coming to market deadline sale auctions, and you do need to be prepared before you go to these things.
You do, and your size deposit is completely relevant. So, you know, what we get to know behind the scenes is that the banks operate a traffic light system. So one day they'll be all red saying no funding available, the next day there'll be a green light, we've got funding available with a signed contract. Very rarely, but this also happens, we've got funding available to pre-approve with less than 20% deposit. Now they're very rare, purely because if they do a pre-approval, those funds are reserved for 60 to 90 days depending upon the lender. So if somebody else comes behind them that's found a property, that door's closed until those 60 to 90 days is gone, and that money can come back into the pot. So pre-approvals with less than 20% deposit for existing property is very, very difficult.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of buyers have probably found that, and I myself actually had that problem a couple of months ago. I was looking to buy my first home, just fell under that category of that 20% deposit and got turned down by a number of lenders. Hopefully as of early next year, those people should be able to find it easier.
Yeah, it's a big timing issue, and especially as a first home buyer, it's tough because not only are you just entering this whole process for the first time, traditionally a few years ago you'd say, right, let's get you pre-approved, we know exactly where you are before you get emotionally involved. Now it's the complete opposite. Find the property, we can give you good guidance on whether the deal can work. Find the property, if you find the property that you like, put an offer in subject to finance, and then we have to go and apply for finance, and hopefully one of the lenders at that point in time has got the funding available. So it's a real emotional journey really for first home buyers. So it's great that the Reserve Bank have increased the cap. Very timely as well, because with all these other changes that have happened with regards overseas, we'll maybe touch on that at the moment now. Overseas now have been not banned from the housing market, but redirected. So they're redirected, can only purchase new build now. If you're Australia, you can still purchase existing, but as an overseas investor, you can only now buy existing stock with a 40% deposit.
Yeah.
So it's great that the Reserve Bank they've created a void by redirecting the overseas to new build. Now they're trying to, I think there's still more needs to be done, especially for first home buyers, but the fact they're releasing more funding for people to buy owner occupied with less than 20% just helps fill that void that's been created.
Yeah, and that's going to have some impact obviously going forward, and obviously nobody really knows, what's going to happen, but I suppose a couple of factors playing in the part of our market: LVR restrictions, which we've touched on, Brightline tax, which we've just talked about a little bit, and Airbnb potential changes, so tightening up on those restrictions there.
Yeah, and I guess the change there as well with the Airbnb is that, so traditionally you can rent your property out up to 90 days per year. Now this is all going through consultation at the moment, and the intention is, if this goes through, that if you're in the CBD you can still rent the full house out up to 90 days per year, but beyond the CBD you'll be capped at 28 days under a maximum of 3 bookings. God only knows how they're going to manage and place that. It's bad enough that they're reducing the number of days, but to introduce a maximum of 3 bookings is terrible. And something to make sure viewers are aware as well is that this only impacts if you rent out the whole house. So myself, for example, I renovated my boxing gym into a 1-bedroom apartment a few months ago. Because I live on the land, this is a separate building, but I live on the land, so I register as a homestay. I pay an extra 25% on my rates, which is $40 a month, and I can rent out 365 days of the year. And I think what's probably going to be interesting for you next year is that people that are renting out the full house that have actually gone through the resource consent process, so they can rent out for longer than 90 days per year, they will be valuing that consent. If and when they come to sell that property, I would suggest as an investor, because that resource consent will be honoured moving forward. So that's got to add value, I would have thought, to properties for investors looking to purchase and rent out Airbnb for more than 90 days of the year.
And then they already have that consent.
Correct.
Obviously, as of when those policies come in, it's going to be more difficult to actually obtain the consent or impossible.
Because they know what the changes are going to be, and I think that that's one of the problems we come across when people are looking at finances, that they might have done a granny flat. And they've or an apartment, they've got the consent, and then they've put the kitchen in. The only problem is, if it's not consented, we can only include a border income of, say, $150 a week. If they've gone through the full consent process, and let's say they get a long-term rental appraisal for $450, $500 a week, we can use that full income towards application when you're lending money. So we do find that some people sometimes haven't got the right consents in place, and I think the lesson learned with this Airbnb is that you've got to realise that if you don't get it in place and things change, you're going to be caught out. And also from a lending perspective, if you haven't got the right consent, we can't use the proper income that we should be able to use.
So I guess advice to our viewers is, if you've got you're running Airbnb, or you have a homestay, or you're worried about how this might affect you, give you a call just to sort of break down what your situation is, and whether you do need to do something right now, or look at some long-term options.
They're all quite different, the lenders. With Airbnb, for example, we'll have a client come and see us, look, we're going to do Airbnb, this is what we're going to earn. The bank's not interested. Some of the banks aren't interested, full stop. The ones that are, you've got to have at least 12 months financials and run it as a business for that to be considered. So there's some of the nuances that are quite different between the lenders, and the policies, as I said earlier, they've never been more different than they are today.
It's all interesting stuff. I think just touching a little bit on the Queenstown market, so we've just had the sales figures released for last month's November. So Queenstown Lakes have had a 10.5% growth for the last 12 months, so the average value now is 1.1 million, so quite a jump, and we're up 0.7% for the quarter.
Wow.
So we're still growing. Obviously, there's been a lot of press on the Queenstown market, worries of things, what are we doing? Are we going down? We're more relaxed? Are we still growing? But I think the figures for sure are still holding quite strong. I think main difference I've noticed selling is things are taking maybe a little bit longer to sell, as opposed to, about a year ago we were 2-3 weeks, auctions being brought forward. Maybe owners are sort of looking towards more deadline sales as opposed to auction, because buyers, sometimes they just can't bid unconditionally. Lending's not all in place, or the banks are obviously tightening up. So I found
on that point as well, and I've been talking to a couple of people around town, is that again, when you've got less than 20% deposit, we have to have a signed contract 99% of the time when funding is available. It's got to be a signed contract. So things like auction limit, if somebody's got less than 20% deposit, you can't go to an auction. So it really limits, depending on some of the properties, you can't get a pre-approval. So it has an impact on some of the types of marketing with some of the properties. I think if it's a first home buyer product and it's going to auction, then there's a big part of the market going to be cut out.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've kind of tried to stay away from auctions, just listening to my buyers as well. One of them mainly being finance. Obviously you can't bid unconditionally, but just the stress surrounding an auction process can be quite hard, especially for first time buyers. And we know that perhaps now the investors are not as strong in our market as they were previously. Going forward with the the investor sort of bans coming in, we might see a market aimed towards that, owner occupiers, first time buyers, and those investors may take a step back. And what does that mean for our prices going forward? Our house prices, are we looking at a slight decline or a plateau? Who knows? I think it's all speculation at this point, but it's good to understand really what's going on, the concepts surrounding the market, and those factors that are contributing to those growth factors as well.
Yeah, and I think it's probably worth highlighting and reiterating to people as well that the LVR restrictions only impact existing property. So new build is exempt. What that means is that we talk about this less than 20% funding. With new build, all the banks have got funding available every day of the week to buy land and build with a 10% deposit every day of the week. So that's just important, just to be aware of that. That if if you're really struggling to get your timing right to buy an existing property, there is always funding available and pre-approval for new build, so you know exactly what your abilities are.
Yeah. Am I right in saying, Stuart, that investors that are not exempt in the ban coming forward, that to buy house and land packages and new builds, that's still okay for them?
Correct.
Existing homes only.
So overseas, Australians for example, they can still continue, and expats still continue to buy building.
Whatever.
Buy off plan. And as an investor buying new build or off plan, you can use 20% deposit.
Right.
So it gets you around that 40% deposit requirement as well.
So that might mean seeing for the future, perhaps our investors are going to be aiming towards those new builds, house and land packages, which is almost, I suppose, a little bit of a shame, because that product is aimed predominantly at
This is my concern with the change. It's like Labour have probably done a bit sleight of hand trick here. They talk about they've banned overseas, they haven't banned anybody, they've redirected them. So my concern here is that in Queenstown, 50% of what we do is new build, and first home buyers can do that with a 10% deposit. Doesn't suit everybody because hardly anything's got title, so there's a time frame, but there's going to be a big percentage of investors that will come into this funnel, which is going to cause problems unless the developers release more sections sooner because of the demand. Now that would be great, and that's what we need. But if they don't, then yes, it's going to be it's not necessarily going to be a positive impact for this town because there's so much building.
Yeah, there's definitely high demand out there, and hopefully, the only positive to that is the investors will buy those sections and build quicker. I think the investors can have the money and the means to get those subdivisions up and running quicker than perhaps our local owner occupiers.
And I suppose that's where the Brightline test does come in. It helps stop. Well, probably everybody at one point or others speculated it's not good for the longevity of the market. And the Brightline test, which is a capital gains tax test, at the moment is 2 years. If you sell a property within 2 years, you are liable for capital gains tax, and that will increase to 5 years. The question is when. again, Labour have made a few announcements, but there's not a lot of detail behind it, so there's a bit of speculation, but the anticipation you would assume would be for the next financial year, and you would also like to think that it isn't retrospectively being implemented. That they don't usually do that. I would think that it would start from the 1st of April 2018 moving forward.
Yeah.
I would have thought.
Yeah, no, we hope so. None of us really know. Obviously, as the months progress, we'll come to you with more information. But I think for now, hopefully, you've taken away some information from that. And thank you very much, Stuart,
No, it's a pleasure, Donna.
giving us a bit of a rundown on the Queenstown market. So yeah, thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll see you next month.
See you later.